Flight attendants and pilots, what NSFW things occur during your jobs? Father was a commercial pilot. He has lots of stories. His most WTF NSFW story was probably having to deal with a lactating woman breastfeeding her cat in coach. Not totally on topic, but I fly a lot for work. And one time I walked to the bathroom as a flight attendant was walking out. She saw me heading in right after her and said, "Be careful. There's a bomb in the bathroom." I think it was a nervous reference to her having just blown up the toilet. And she quickly realized what she said as I gave her a perplexed look walking into the bathroom. She pulled me aside as I walked out and apologized profusely, probably knowing she'd have lost her job if someone less understanding had heard it. As a flight engineer in the AF flying out of an island in the Pacific, a sailor had fallen overboard and drowned. The Navy recovered his body a few days later. Since this is downrange, only a body bag is available, not a transport casket. Before takeoff, the loadmaster comes to the cockpit screaming, yelling and babbling. He says the body in the bag is wiggling. Turns out eels have entered his body via his mouth and are wiggling within his body and causing the movement. Not me, but a friend who's a flight attendant who came across this really stubborn male passenger who wanted a sanitary pad that he saw the flight attendant hand over to a female passenger. Convinced that it was an eye mask thingy you put on before sleeping. Arguing with her about it. I was a flight attendant for 6 years. Summer flights to party islands like Ibiza, Mallorca and Mykonos could get quite raunchy. Like women boarding in fishnets. Wanking and blowjobs at the back of the aircraft. Edit. By fishnets I don't mean just tights. I mean full body fishnets. No bra and the skimpiest thong you can imagine. And that's just the airline staff. My wife and I bought last minute tickets to a family event and could not get seats next to each other. Once we boarded, I convinced the guy sitting next to my wife to switch seats with me. Nice guy takes my assigned seat, which was next to a woman who was apparently suffering from the flu. 5 minutes after takeoff, she projectile vomits, but tried to use a pillow to cover her mouth, which just made the vomit spray out sideways, all over the poor guy. He just sits there for a moment, frozen, and then slowly turns back to look at me with this face that said, "You did this to me and I will forever hate you for it." I offered to buy him a drink but he ignored me. It was a 6-hour flight. I was on a flight to China. One of the passengers up in business class decided to take advantage of the unlimited drinks he was offered before takeoff. He got plastered. When the plane started to take off, he decided to take a sleeping pill to tide him over for the 14-hour flight we were about to endure. Well, shortly after takeoff, the guy decided he needed to use the bathroom. He ventures back to where the stalls are, but shoots past them. He walks about 3 rows ahead of my row, whips out his member and pisses all over the row and the people in it. They had to move the passengers, rip out the seats, and monitor the guy for the rest of the flight. Whatever happened to him? I have no idea. I'm just glad he didn't hold it in for 3 more rows. I used to work as a baggage guy, loading and unloading planes. On our planes, we had to put the passengers' pets in a small area in the front belly compartment. We had an inbound flight that had quite a few pets on board. When I opened the compartment door, I was hit with the most gut-wrenching dog tea smell. Once I was able to see through my watery eyes, I saw one large dog kennel pressed up against a small kennel. The idiots that loaded the plane put both the kennel's front gate ends together. The larger dog must have pressed its ass up against and tea through the gate because the little dog was covered in tea and in the corner quivering and whimpering. Trying to explain and apologize to the little dog's owner was one of the hardest and funniest things I've ever had to do. On a flight to Cancun, everyone was drinking, getting their vacation on early. Somehow, a passenger let loose the most silent, most deadly fart ever. It was the kind of smell that caused complete strangers to become friends in a shared moment of horrid existence. Lots of gagging. The stench awoke my sleeping GF. The stewardess, en route to a call button further up the section, stopped gagged and turned back around fleeing to safety. Not a flight attendant. But the guy behind me got detained once we landed because he was playing with himself next to two girls in their 20s. Like solitaire. Semicolon. Not pilot or flight attendant. And actually happened during SAS screening. After a weekend of EDC in Vegas. Everyone is lined up to go home. Strike up conversation with the girl in front of us and she mentions how she had a surplus of party favors left over from said festival. She said she didn't know what to do with them and decided to take them before getting on the plane. Tsar takes one look at her eyes and tells her to lift up her shirt or something like that. Didn't quite get the gist of it. And she lifts up her entire shirt with bra. Flashing that Tsar agent. She was promptly escorted into secondary. 5 minutes before the plane was due to take off. She ambles on the plane and finds a seat. Survey pilot here. Sometimes when I'm flying back and forth for 5 hours straight I need to piss in a bottle. One of my co-workers had his dick slip out of the bottle while he was going full bore. And he pissed all over the instrument panel. You should have heard his desperation on the radio. A couple weeks later. For our bi-monthly rotation. A new guy took his plane. And we didn't tell him that Greg pissed all over it like a moron. F King Greg. Hello control, Greg just pissed all over the F King panel. I was a flight attendant in the Marine Corps. Inside joke. Helicopter crew chief. Mechanic who flew in the back of a helicopter and served as the aircraft commander's extension of authority in the cabin of the plane. Also loaded cargo. Calculated weight and balance. Operate crew, served weapons and generally just worked as an additional set of eyes and ears. Especially for things the pilots can't see. E.g. looking straight down. Anyways. I worked on V-22s and for cross-country flights we would go up over 10,000 feet. We had a bunch of auxiliary fuel tanks in the cabin. So you could squeeze by then if you needed. But can't really see back there. The guy in the back said to me on Ike's internal comms system, "Hey, I'm going off Ike's. If you don't hear from me in 2 minutes, come back and put my oxygen mask on." He came on Ike's a short time later and I asked on a private channel what was going on, so the pilots wouldn't hear, and he took off his oxygen mask at 25,000 feet so he could jerk off while hypoxic. Along the lines of autoerotic asphyxiation. My mom has been a flight attendant for Air Canada for 43 years. I've heard lots of stories but one always stuck with me. Back in the 80s when China was just opening up. My mom would get a lot of older folks from rural China on her flights from Beijing or Hong Kong. Apparently many of these people had never used a modern flush toilet before. On more than one occasion they would simply close the lid, position themselves on top of the toilet, and promptly defecate on top of the toilet seat before leaving. Also, many of these folks would apparently just suck up huge gobs of phlegm and spit them right in the middle of the aisle. Luckily, things have gotten better in the intervening years. I am a test pilot for a small startup. Landed a few weeks ago at a small airport in the middle of nowhere to empty my piss bottle, fill up my water bottle. My right seat wanted to check out the heli that was there, Long Ranger. I went to use the bathroom and he comes running to me. Turns out the two medics for the local medevac service were in the heli making bam bam. We got to watch them both run naked from heli to their training station. On the way out over the radio we got asked to never discuss what we saw. Sorry. This is a great story. But all I can think about is whether those were two separate bottles or not. I'm not a pilot yet but I am a qualified engineer. One summer I was replacing a switch in the cockpit on a turnaround and while I was walking through the gate I noticed this kid, who looked about 6 years old and it turned out had Down syndrome, asked her ma'am to take her to the toilet. Her ma'am replied, "No, I'm busy, 2 seconds." So I saw her just stand in the middle of the room and just shitty. Literally it was like a pool of shitty. The woman screamed at me, "Can you get someone to clean it up?" And I was like, whoa. I'm just the engineer. That was pretty NSFW. Feel sorry for whoever did have to clean it up though. I'm a co-pilot for a company that charters private jets. We had a customer who boarded with his boss and several beautiful women in revealing clothing. And in the air we could hear a party going on in the back. Loud music. Men laughing and cheering. Girls giggling. After a while the door opens and someone taps me on the shoulder. I look and a completely naked woman casually asks me how much longer we have before landing. I tell her we have a couple more hours to go. Pilot here. That stuff mostly happens when we get to the hotel wherever we're overnighting. I fiak now what I mean wink wink nudge nudge. Another guy I shared a crash pad with in LGA said he used to bang a far in one of the bunks when he went over the Atlantic. We both agreed it was awesome. But very dumb. Fireable offense. There's lots of stories like that. But they are all kind of boring after a while. Obligatory not me but a friend of mine disclaimer. I have a female friend who flies transatlantic as a flight attendant. She told me a story of how one of the passengers had been in the bathroom for at least 15 minutes. Being a busy flight, people were pissed off and complained to her that he had been in there for a long time. She went to the door, knocked a couple of times with no response. Obviously being concerned for this passenger's safety. The doors were opened. Inside was a guy on toilet. Trousers around ankles. Headphones in his phone with PRN playing and flaccid penis in hand. Bro fell asleep while whacking it in an airplane toilet. Embarrassment ensued. One time I was watching a movie and a hot scene came on. I got a stiffy and hid it under my blanket and changed the channel. Hit not hit, but going to leave typo. I think you made a typo pal. Stroke. Unless you were attempting to bash the decency back into your junk haha. Edit. Gracious for the gold kind stranger. Just a plain passenger. But this happened on my last flight. About halfway through, the pilot comes over the intercom and says please come out of the bathroom. Smoking in an airplane is illegal. Naturally. This gets the whole plane on edge. Turns out, it was an old woman who was completely naked and vaping in the bathroom while refusing to come out. They eventually had to break into the bathroom and take her out, which then caused the woman to try and fight the flight attendants. She was arrested as soon as we landed. My flight director found a bag that was moving in the overhead bin. It turns out, it was a young girl in a bag. Out of Port-au-Prince. Hearty. It was a SX slave-hating girl being sent to Canada. Edit. The security and the police were called. She was heavily drugged. No one knows who put her up there. I hope she is okay now. Everyone is telling once in a lifetime type stories. But the most common NSFW thing that happens on airplanes is dudes falling asleep and getting noticeable boners. Edit. I have a new appreciation for top commenters lol. Thank you for all of your boner stories. I was that guy once. Woke up with a blanket and when I thanked the steward he told me why I got the blanket. This happened to another pilot at our company. We fly small planes with no doors between the cockpit and the cabin. We usually put our jackets behind our seats. A passenger sitting in the front seats could easily grab them without us noticing. At the end of one flight, he noticed that the passenger on the left front seat was sitting on his jacket. Very odd. But whatever. The passengers deplaned and he went to pick up his jacket. That's when it hit him. The passenger had taken a shitty on the seat. Grabbed the pilot's jacket and put it over the shitty and sat back down on it. It was only a 20-minute flight. How badly do you have to go? Thanks Reddit. My highest comment is now about shitting on a plane. Best friend is a flight attendant. She's seen some things. Man. And some stuff. One woman pissed herself. One woman fainted and then pissed herself. Her colleague got caught by a passenger miming a BJ. But not from an angle where you could tell it was a mime. And she'd like you all to know that they see you. Yeah you. With the blanket. They see. Edit. She's just added to story of the mimed BJ that is was also a same sex mimed BJ. And when the homophobia started flying, they started accidentally dropping drinks on people. So that stain on your cushion might not be piss after all. Not a pilot. Or a flight attendant. But was once a mechanic. I was just a passenger but on a flight to Florida. A guy got drunk and stabbed himself in the eye with a plastic fork. When the flight attendant asked him how that happened, he reenacted it. And stabbed himself in the other eye. About 15 years ago when I was in my final year at 6th form, a girl and I hit it off on a school trip to Hawaii. On the flight back to London we sat next to each other. She proceeded to jerk me off, as Americans put it. I was next to the window. She was in the middle. My teacher was on the outer seat. I feel f***ing terrible about it now. My poor teacher. But at 17 that was the best thing that had ever happened to me. I'm counting it as the Mile High Club. Military pilot. We get shot at. Kind of NSFW. Some low-cost airlines have been making the toilets so small that when people are done with a no. 2. Whilst reaching round at a funny angle to get the toilet paper behind them, they smish tea from their ass on the wall. Poor fars have to clean this. Flight attendant here. Pilots are hooking up with flight attendants constantly. I've walked in on 2 different guys in the bathroom. Lock it. People. Dot. A couple weeks ago I had a lady use the lavabo and didn't even shut the door. I see camel humps daily, the male equivalent of a camel toe. I've cock-blocked people trying to get into the Mile High Club. There's also plenty of rumors of pilots and flight attendants hooking up mid-flight. But I myself have never experienced this. When one pilot has to go to the bathroom, a flight attendant will go up in the flight deck. And last year I had a guy who was drunk on drugs and groped a female passenger. I would imagine lots of tray tables being left up and seats not being in the full upright position. As a passenger, I was on a night flight and the guy in front of me was high off his ass. He kept complaining that it was dark and couldn't find the button for his light. So he busts out his lighter, waving it around. It looks like he was about to set something on fire. That caused some panic. But the stoner complied and put the lighter away. FCK, I hate flying. Not the flying part, but the people part. This is a personal story, but on the same flight to the South Korea I was molested by an old man. I'm a dude, and was the only one to help a lady having a seizure with no medical background. While the flight attendants laughed street me when I demanded a new seat or I was going to punch a senior citizen. They also just stared when the seizure lady's husband starts screaming in Chinese, I believe. I just laid her in the aisle and that was that. Never again flying with Korean Air. Edit. Seizure lady happened within 30 minutes of me moving the chair. I see a small Southeast Asian man with his daughter or younger wife completely limp and he's in the aisle freaking out and everyone just stared. I was pretty pissed, but I took some EMS classes. She apparently had a seizure already, but the guy thought she was dead. She was freezing when I laid her down, but then she just came to after a few minutes. Please people, if you can help. Help. Tired of a society that would rather film it on their phone than try to help a fellow human. Nice try. FAA. One time on a flight from Paris back to America, this woman had a baby with her but was acting very suspicious. Turns out it had been a giant block of cheese that she didn't want to ship or check, so she wrapped it up a blanket and put a bonnet on it. A Singapore Airlines flight from KL to Tokyo. In the rear of the plane it was me and this Japanese fellow, and that's all. He tells me he likes to drink and asks me to join. I do, and after calling the air hostess 5 times she ends up just hanging out there, feeding us liquor, flirting and refereeing our drinking games. Land in Tokyo and spend my layover recovering from hangover on his couch, which he insisted I come over and use. Such a fine and hospitable chapter. I'm a pilot in the corporate sector of aviation. Mainly privately owned jets for really rich folks. A pilot I used to fly with another pilot who told me the story about having to drop the boss's wife at New York for shopping sprees. Then running back home to pick up the boss and his mistress of the week. And take them to Vegas or the Caribbean. Apparently, The mistress accompanied trips always had plenty of passenger-induced turbulence. I've personally only experienced passenger-induced turbulence once. And it was just the guy and his wife in the back. Not so risque.